trying to grasp defense intelligence.
Yeah.
It sometimes feels like you're putting together this massive, crazy, complicated machine, but it's already running full speed.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the government's always on the hunt for, like, the brightest minds and the most cutting-edge tech to make sense of it all.
Right.
That's what we find so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
How do you bring those innovations into such a high-stakes arena? It's a puzzle.
Definitely. I mean, the challenges facing the DIE, that's the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, they're so huge and intricate, right?
Yeah.
You need a way to find the right experts, a way that's forward-thinking and can adapt. If you only rely on the big, established players, you might miss out on some key new ideas and skills, those specialized things that smaller companies often bring.
Totally agree. So that leads us right into what we're diving deep into today, right? It's the DIA's, the Defense Intelligence Agency's program. It's called Solutions for Intelligence Analysis, or SIA3. And they've got this on-ramp initiative coming up. One of our awesome listeners sent us a document that's from a pre-solicitation conference about this on-ramp.
Oh, nice.
So that's our mission today, right? To really dig into why the DIA thinks this on-ramp is so important for SIA3, how they've set it up, and what it all means for the world of defense intelligence right now, where things are headed.
Makes sense. SIA3 has been a pretty big deal in defense intelligence since they set it up back in August 2019.
Yeah.
It's an IDIQ contract that's indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. Basically, it's a framework so the government can order services over time as they need them. No fixed quantity up front.
Pretty big deal. Might be an understatement. I mean, we're talking over $5.9 billion awarded directly to small businesses.
Right.
Breaks down like this. Over $3.1 billion in direct awards. Then about $2.8 billion set aside from those larger business awards, which, just to put a number on it, were around $8.1 billion total. And over 35% of that was carved out specifically for small businesses. So you can see they're really committed to involving small businesses.
Absolutely. And that's really at the core of why they need this on-ramp.
Yeah.
SIA3, you see, it's built with this requirement for what they call a deep small business restricted pool. It's not optional. It's fundamental to how the contract works. The restricted part means some task orders are only for these small businesses to compete for. Keeps those opportunities coming their way.
Okay, I'm following. But let's break that down a bit more. Why is this deep pool so crucial? And what kind of problems pop up if it, starts shrinking?
Well, even if the two small businesses in the restricted pool right now are enough for competition, the rules say they have to recertify every year to prove they're still small businesses.
Right.
And here's the interesting part. One of them will probably graduate out of the small business category in the next year or two. The other one, they're a native 8A firm, so they have a special status. They don't graduate the same way. Bottom line, the numbers are going down.
So if the DIA doesn't do this on-ramp, what are the downsides besides just having fewer companies? It sounds like it could get messy.
It really could. The document talks about some serious risks. The biggest one is they could actually lose the SIA3 restricted pool altogether.
Oh, wow.
Losing that pool wouldn't just be annoying paperwork. It could really hurt the flow of new technologies, the really cutting-edge stuff and that niche expertise that smaller companies often bring. That could make the DIA less flexible in dealing with new threats.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
If that happened, the DIA would likely have to use other ways to get the work done, like standalone contracts or GWCs, government-wide acquisition contracts. But those might not fit their specific intelligence analysis needs as well.
Doesn't sound efficient or cheap either.
Nope. It could really hurt the DIA's ability to pull everything together and tackle those global problems, the big picture stuff. Imagine trying to solve this huge, super complicated puzzle, but some of the most important pieces are in different puzzle boxes.
Right. I get it.
And it also weakens the DIA's ability to invest wisely, to really put their money where their mission is. Plus, get this, the document even says they could end up paying millions of dollars in service fees if they have to use GWACs more.
Ouch. So we're talking big consequences, not just bureaucratic stuff, real impact on operations and the budget. They even show how the small business numbers have changed, right? Started with 6, down to 2, and they want to get back to 6 to 8.
Exactly. And remember, this on-ramp isn't for big companies. It's all about bringing in more small businesses. Now, let's look at the what. What are these complex requirements that SIA3 and this on-ramp are trying to meet? All this stuff the DIE needs to get done globally.
Right, because it's not just about the number of contractors. It's about having the right skills, the right experience. The document mentions 5 mission task areas, MTAs. What are they?
They are Engineering, analysis, analytic enabling, science, and then CIU I meant counterintelligence, human intelligence, like you said before.
Right.
So they're looking for a very broad range of expertise.
For sure. And the users of SIA3, they come from all over, right? Over 20 DIA offices, all 7 combatant commands, plus U.S. Forces Korea, 4 different intelligence community agencies, and all the service intelligence centers. That's a lot of different customers.
Huge customer base, very diverse. And their focus areas are just as diverse. They cover everything from the traditional ways of gathering intelligence to, like, the bleeding edge, things like next-generation data science, advanced threat modeling. They even have very specialized areas, like counterintelligence and cover operations.
So if a small business wants to be a prime contractor under SIA3 through this on-ramp, it's not enough to be good at just one thing, right? The document is very clear. To be a prime, you have to show you can handle all 5 of those mission task areas. That's a pretty high bar to clear.
Definitely. You need either a very diverse skill set within your company or a really strong network of partners. And that brings us to what they call the challenge of success.
Right.
SIA3 has been so successful, such a valuable contract, that hundreds of small businesses want to join the restricted pool.
Hundreds. It's a lot of competition.
It's a good problem to have in a way, but it creates a new set of challenges. The original SIA3 selection process, it took them 15 months to look at just 28 bids. They just don't have that kind of time for this on-ramp, especially since they need to fill that small business pool quickly. Ideally, they want it done in less than a year.
Makes sense. And thinking about it, there could be over 400 small businesses who are already subcontractors under the existing SIA3 primes and want to compete directly. That's a lot of proposals.
It is. It would be incredibly hard and time-consuming to compare that many bidders in the usual way. 15 months for 28 bids, that's practically a full-time job just evaluating proposals.
So they need a smarter, more efficient system. The document mentions a gated or tiered evaluation approach. What does that look like in practice?
Think of it like a series of filters, each one getting more selective. They need to find a way to quickly identify the best candidates and not waste time evaluating companies that aren't a good fit. They have a few ideas, like giving early feedback to companies that aren't competitive on their own, maybe advising them to team up with other firms. And then they're thinking about requiring bids to be submitted on secure networks like JWICS. Also, companies would have to prove they have experience in the intelligence community, and they're putting more emphasis on past performance across all 5 MTAs for prime bidders. Plus, they're exploring new, innovative ways to evaluate the technical side of proposals.
Okay, so being strategic and efficient. So let's talk about the how. How are they going to decide who makes the cut? What criteria are they using?
They have 4 main criteria: qualifications, corporate experience, past performance, and technical approach. Qualifications, like security clearances, those are pass-fail. If you don't meet them, you're out.
Simple enough. What about corporate experience? That seems like it will be really important, especially since they need companies that can handle all 5 MTAs.
You're absolutely right. The DIA sees corporate experience, basically the skills and knowledge a company has from doing similar work, as a major factor. They need to be sure that any company they choose for the restricted pool can actually compete for and win task orders across all 5 MTAs across the entire DIE.
Right. And what about past performance? That's always a big deal in government contracts, right?
It is. It's basically a way to see how well a company did on past contracts. And when it comes to national security, that's super important. The DIA needs to be confident that the companies they bring in have a history of delivering high-quality work reliably.
Okay, and then there's the technical approach. What does that involve in this case?
The technical approach is about assessing whether a company understands the kinds of requirements they'll see in SIA3 task orders. Can they handle the specifics of the work?
I see.
And the good thing is, the GSA, the General Services Administration, has given them the green light to use what they've learned from the initial SIA3 awards in this on-ramp evaluation. So they can adjust their criteria based on real-world experience, what worked and what didn't.
Smart move, adapt as you go.
Exactly.
Now let's dig into that tiered evaluation process. You mentioned it earlier. Can you walk us through the different steps?
Sure. It starts with an initial review, what they call a pre-RFP advisory RFI, a request for information. This is really interesting. They want to check out companies' corporate experience before they even submit a full proposal. It's like a heads up, are you even in the running?
Kind of pre-screening them.
Exactly. Companies will send in a statement about their relevant experience, and the DIA will look it over and tell them if they think they're viable, like, do they have a chance? A big goal here is to get companies teaming up early on. If a company is strong in some MTAs but weak in others, they might be told to find a partner who can fill those gaps. This helps companies make better decisions about bidding. Maybe they can save time and money by not writing a whole proposal if they're not really ready to be a prime. And importantly, if you want to be considered later on, you have to participate in this initial RFI.
Okay, that's streamlining things from the start. What happens after this initial check?
After the initial review, we go to Phase 1. This is after the RFP, the request for proposals, is released. Phase 1 focuses on the offer's qualifications, corporate experience, and past performance.
Right.
A big one here is that every offerer, including any joint ventures they form, needs an active top-secret facility clearance, an FCL. That's pass-fail, no exception.
No wiggle room there.
Nope. There might be a couple more pass-fail qualifications, but they don't expect a lot. And if you don't pass these, you're done.
And what about the SF-1508, that self-certification about accounting systems? I know it's mentioned, but not a deal breaker right away.
Yeah, that's right. A compliant accounting system is definitely important, especially since SIA3 has cost reimbursement task orders. But not having an SF-1408 right now won't automatically disqualify you. Although it's a sign that to compete for all types of task orders, you'll probably need it eventually.
Makes sense.
Now, in Phase 1, they look at corporate experience and past performance separately. This is important because it lets them evaluate newer companies that might not have a lot of past performance without giving them a neutral rating, which happens a lot in government contracting.
Right, I see.
And, of course, that experience across all 5 MTAs is still key. The document actually says they learned from the initial SIA3 awards that both the prime contractor and their team need experience in all those areas. They even give an example of a small business that won an award but then struggled in the MTAs where they didn't have experience until they found the right partners. So Phase 1 is another big filter. Only the most qualified companies who meet the criteria will move on to Phase 2. They're thinking of making a competitive range, probably the top 10 proposals, who will be invited to the next stage.
Okay, so we're through the initial review and Phase 1. What's next for the companies that are left?
Phase 2 is all about the technical evaluation. This is where they're changing things up. They're going to use oral presentations with questions and scenarios instead of long written technical proposals.
Interesting. What's the thinking behind that?
A few reasons. First, it's a more direct way to see if the companies really have the skills and experience with the proposal methods they'll use for SIA3 task orders. Second, it lets the evaluation team talk to the companies directly, ask questions, and see how they solve problems in real time. Plus, since they've already narrowed the field in Phase 1, they can do these in-depth oral evaluations without taking too much time.
Smart. And they're also thinking about how AI is changing things, right? The document mentions that AI tools can make it easier to write proposals, so you might get more submissions from companies that aren't actually qualified.
Right. Oral presentations make it harder to fake it. You can't just rely on an AI to write something that sounds good. You have to actually understand the work. In Phase 2, the evaluation team will give each offerer a confidence rating based on the criteria in the solicitation.
Okay, and then finally the awards. What happens then?
The Source Selection Authority will use the Phase 2 ratings to choose the best offerers, the ones with the highest overall scores. They're planning on 6 to 8 awards, but they could do more or less depending on how the evaluations go.
So it's a multi-step process, very structured, designed to find the best small businesses who can handle these critical intelligence needs. The document even gives a timeline, doesn't it?
It does. The pre-solicitation conference was in early November 2024. Then they put out the RFI for the corporate experience reviews. The RFP for Phase 1 should be out soon, and then the responses will be due. After that, they'll publish the Phase 1 results, then release the schedule and questions for Phase 2, the oral presentations. They'll conduct those, and they're hoping to make the SIA3 on-ramp awards in Q3 of fiscal year 2025. So things are moving.
That's a balancing act. They need to fill that small business pool fast, but they also can't rush the evaluation. The document also talks about what they learned from SIA2, the previous contract, and how that shaped SIA3. What were some of the big changes?
Oh, there were a lot of improvements. For instance, SIA2 was mostly focused on the DIA itself, but SIA3 covers the entire DIE. The way they award contracts also changed. SIA2 used mostly LPTA, low price, technically acceptable, basically the cheapest bid that met the minimum requirements won. But SIA3, they care more about quality and innovation than just the price. They're using HITER, highest technical rating equals proposed price, or best value trade-off. And the total value of rewards has gone way up from about $2.2 billion under SIA2 to over $11.2 billion so far with SIA3.
Wow, that's a huge difference. Did the types of task orders change too?
Yeah, almost all the SIA2 task orders were LPTA, but under SIA3, they're almost all height or best value trade-off. Only one LPTA so far.
Interesting.
They also addressed some pricing issues. Under SIA2, companies would sometimes bid really low just to get on the contract, then offer big discounts on task orders to win work. But that could be unstable, questions about whether they could actually do the work for that price. SIA3, they set floor rates for labor categories to prevent that.
Makes sense. And it sounds like staffing and performance have gotten better under SIA3.
Much better. SIA2 had problems with staffing levels, often below 70%, and high turnover. SIA3, they're usually above 95% staffing, less turnover, and the quality of work is higher. And remember how SIA2 used mainly written proposals? SIA3 switched to oral presentations with scenarios. They also expanded the number of labor categories from 32 to 103 to match the specialized skills they need.
So they're always learning, getting better.
Right. And they formalized the process for handling small businesses that graduate out of the program. That was more ad hoc under SIO2, where both the original small businesses ended up graduating.
So they're constantly refining the process, making it smarter.
Yes.
The document has some interesting data about SIA3 too, right? Like which companies are winning task orders, what kinds of government organizations are using the contract, things like that.
It's a good snapshot of how things are going. We can see which companies in both the unrestricted pool and the small business restricted pool have won the most task orders and how much money they've been awarded. And it's worth noting that while some companies are doing really well, there are awards going to quite a few different contractors. The data also shows all the different government organizations using SIO3. The DIA is a big one, of course, but the combatant commands, NSCOM, and other agencies are using it too. Shows how widely useful it is across the defense intelligence community.
And what about team sizes? I remember the documents mentioned that.
That's important. The charts showing how many partners each prime contractor has really highlight that you need a strong team to be successful on SIA3. It takes a village, as they say. They even advise companies thinking about SIA3 to not go it alone and point out how many partners even the big companies have.
So teamwork is essential.
Absolutely.
There's also data on the evaluation methods DIA used for SIA3 task orders.
Yeah. Yes, and it seems they prefer HITRP over best value trade-off. They tend to go for written proposals over oral presentations at the task order level, and they use time and materials contracts more than cost plus. Also, the average award is about 22% above the floor rate. All this gives potential bidders valuable insight into how the government is actually using SIA3.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain, understanding what the government is looking for.
Exactly.
So to wrap it up, it's clear this SIA3 on-ramp is really important for the DIA. They need to keep a strong, competitive group of small businesses in this contract because it's been so successful and vital. They've put a lot of thought into the evaluation process, making it tough but fair, and they're using what they've learned from past contracts to make it even better. The goal is to make sure they bring in top-notch companies that can handle the complex intelligence missions they have.
You got it. This isn't just about checking a box for small business participation. It's about making sure the whole DIE has the best people and the most innovative solutions to face those ever-changing national security challenges. It shows they're dedicated to excellence and willing to adapt in a world that's constantly in flux.
On that note, here's something to think about. Could this focus on small businesses and this structured on-ramping process be a model for other government agencies? The ones that need very specialized expertise in fields they're changing quickly. And what does it mean for both the big companies and the smaller up-and-coming ones in the defense world? Lots to consider.
A lot to consider, for sure.